Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Full Court Press. I am your host, Drew Duncan. Do not forget that Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram is all at Drew Duncan 83. You can find me on YouTube. Simply look for Drew Duncan. The Full Court Press is on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram as well. And do not forget, we are wherever you listen to podcasts. Simply tell your device to play the Full Court Press by Drew Duncan. Joe Klatt has a very interesting theory about how he would fix the scheduling problems that a lot of people have been complaining about, particularly with Alabama and really the SEC as a whole. Obviously, you look at a team like Texas A&M over the last couple of seasons, at least they were willing to play Clemson. You look at Oregon and Auburn playing out of conference during the regular season, early, mind you. But then, of course, what happens? You know, unless they're competing against another SEC team, there's kind of a dip, and a lot of teams have been guilty of this. I mean, this is something that's gone on for years, right? Glenn Mason, when he was at KU, a lot of people said that he was notorious for beating up on teams that really didn't matter, but a lot of teams in college football have always started off with like a tune-up game, right? Which is why college football really in the first week or two was usually very uninteresting because you'd always had that tune-up game against like a Stephen F. Austin or somebody like that. And, of course, the idea is to win by 50, get your confidence up, and that'd be that. The emergence of the BCS, I think, really began to kind of change things, especially when we saw these teams playing out of conference teams that weren't very good. For instance, you take Auburn, who finished the year 13-0. What was it, like 03, 04, somewhere in that neighborhood? And because they ended up having to schedule Maine for what they said was a conflict of issues, you know, they had a team back out, and allegedly they finished 13-0, but they don't play for a national championship game. And then, of course, as it went on, we would see teams like a Utah or TCU or, of course, Boise State or whomever, and they would go undefeated and they would be out of what is now called the, quote, Power 5 conferences, and they would never get a shot at a national title, right? Then, of course, you had the emergence of the playoff. And with the playoff, it was exactly what I said it was initially, because I believe that a playoff would have given teams an opportunity to schedule better outside of their conference for these football games, because you're not afraid to lose one game anymore, especially if you do a playoff the way that I'm about to discuss here momentarily. And Joe Klatt's theory about fixing all this, instead of scheduling a home-and-home game with somebody or doing whatever, and it was kind of funny, if you watch the explanation, he actually kind of helps Alabama more than he does prove the point by saying it's not Alabama's fault when it really is. But regardless of that, his theory is, okay, let's say Alabama wins a national title, right? Now you're going to play the conference champion from the Big Ten and the Pac-12, right? If those were the two best conferences and bowls and da-da-da-da-da, all these different factors come into play, then you're going to play those two teams. One's going to be at home and one's going to be away. Right? Okay, I'm with that. And what he does is he goes so on and so on, you know, 10th best from last season, et cetera, right? From one to however many are in the division down the pike. Now, of course, obviously it's going to be a little uneven to some extent. There's going to be some things that you just can't do. But overall, it's a very good theory. And he talks about allowing parity. And then, of course, one of the other things he made sure to incorporate into his theory was, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and continue to schedule some of those local games. So, like, for instance, Texas plays Rice almost every single year. And even though it's lopsided, some people call it a rivalry, but others may not, especially to people outside of the state of Texas. Regardless, the idea is those programs play these games, they get this money, and as a result, hear me out, as a result, trickle-down economics, okay? Which is what happens, obviously, when Alabama wins a title, right? Trickle-down economics of the SEC. If Clemson wins one, ACC, et cetera, right? Now, here's where I would take this a couple of steps further. And some of this are things that I've been saying for, I don't know, probably 5 years now. And the first thing I'm going to go with is this. I love the idea of you're going to play 4 games outside of your conference. You're going to make it mandatory 8. Here's the thing, though. Here's where I disagree. And here's why I would love to see college football change. I really believe they need to take the regular season back down to 10 or 11 football games. I think that we are asking collegiate athletes to play too much football. And I understand that it's probably never going to happen because of the revenue stream. But hear me out with this, though. The revenue stream could alter, and we may not see dips in this schedule that Klatt has proposed, because to me, if we go back to 10 regular season games, right, you're going to play 6 games within your conference. You're going to schedule 4 games outside of. That means what's really going to happen is now you're going to play teams within your subdivision all the way through right away, basically, and you're only going to play maybe one team that's not in your subdivision, because those games ultimately have no effect on the conference as a whole. You look at Wake Forest and North Carolina, for instance, this past weekend, the game didn't even count towards the ACC standings. So when you look at that, it doesn't make sense to me to keep these games, right? Now you can schedule like a rival game, right? So Nebraska and Colorado, for instance, are said to be very big rivals, right? And based off of where they are right now, not only does the game make sense predicated upon Joe Klatt's theory, but it still makes sense to keep that rivalry game there. So now, in a lot of instances, because these teams have changed conferences so much over the last, 10 years or so, that now you're actually going to get a third game out of conference between other Power 5 schools. So I would actually like to see 11 games, really at the most. I think that you need to schedule 4 of those games out of conference. I do like the idea of playing those local teams that are not, quote, in Power 5 conferences. And the other thing that I would add to that is you're going to have to play somebody that was really good a season ago from out of your conference. Okay? So you get 4 out-of-conference games. 2 of them are against division teams. You get 1 against one of those local teams that really needs a spot and really needs that money. And then you get another one against either a rival or another team that was like a UCF or a Boise State that was really good the year before, and now you're going to have to play them. And then the step further that I would take even beyond that is you need to expand the playoff to 16 teams. It never needs to be any more than 16 teams in everdom. You have 130 teams in Division I college football. There's absolutely no reason to play anybody that's either ranked out of the top 16 or non-conference champions. And to me, the 2 ways that you can go with that is you play either your top 16 teams ranked across the board, I don't care, Power 5 or not. You're going to play top 16 ranked teams, and that's how it's going to be. And you're going to use your bowl games, Gator Bowl, etc., to play those games so that way they're on neutral sites, and you go from there. Now, the other way that you could do it is your 10 conference champions automatically get in, which I don't necessarily agree with, but a lot of people love that idea. Which I've stated before, it could work, but I think the problem is you'd probably end up with, like, let's say an 8-5 Tulsa team or somebody like that, and I don't think it would look good. But you could. So let's say you take your 10 conference champions, right? You're going to have, obviously, automatically your 5 Power 5 conference champions in. Then on top of that, you're going to have your out-of-conference, your outside of your Power 5 conference champions, and they're going to get better than what's basically a Pick 6 bowl, which says, we like you, kid, but you're really not, quite up to snuff yet. We don't think you're big boy ready. And then, of course, you're going to get 6 bubble teams, right, which are probably like second and third place teams predominantly in Power 5 conferences. So you're still going to be matching up a lot of Power 5 schools up against other schools, but you're going to give them an opportunity to pull off a couple of upsets, generate some bigger revenue for their programs, which is something that Joe Klatt was talking about. Because, look, I think that if you do it my way, not only does it make the regular season more valuable, right, by taking off a game or 2, it makes it more valuable, but it's going to add the want and the need, because part of any type of sale, which is what you're doing, you're selling something to people, you're selling them why they should go see a football game, is creating the need to be there. The less amount of games that you have to attend, the more you better be there. Because with 10 or 11 games scheduled on a season, those fans are going to be there and go, man, we've only got 5 home games this year. Last year we had 6. This year we got 5. I've got to get to a game of football, period. I do like his idea of spreading out those games, right? So you're not, let's say Alabama faces, Ohio State. Yeah, sure, put them in the first week or two. But then later on, when the season sometimes has a tendency to hit a lull, bang, right in the middle of your conference, getting ready. It keeps you focused, keeps you steady, keeps you on track, and again, puts butts in the seats. That's the idea. Let's be honest. This is a business. And in that business, these are the type of things that you need. Look, I think that the problem with football right now is it has become very spoiled. And because it has become very spoiled, they think that they can just do whatever they want and people are just going to watch and show up, and that's going to be it. But the NCAA championship game over the last couple of years has proven that theory wrong. Not only because it's basically right now Alabama and Clemson and everybody else, that's one of the problems, but you look at the scheduling. We're going to throw this on New Year's Eve. Come on. So you factor that in. I mean, one of the playoff games was played on a Friday at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Where does that even begin to make sense? They blame Star Wars coming out that same weekend on why they didn't have success. Well, there was a time when I can guarantee you, as popular as Star Wars is, had a movie come out the same weekend that a college football game was on January 1st, I can promise you that college football game would have done numbers that Star Wars wouldn't have been able to compete with on their best day. Period. It's just the way that it is. Or the way that it was, I should say. Now they've gotten spoiled with all the money and all the revenue that they brought in and just decided, well, we can do whatever we want. It's not the case anymore, man. It's really not the case anymore. And where the NCAA needs to improve, especially with all this stuff going on right now with California passing this law so that way players can generate, their own revenue stream, you're going to have to understand that the more that you put pressure on them and the more games you ask them to play, the more they're going to want for their own. You need to start by taking some pressure off of these kids. There's no reason for a college football student to play 15 games of football. Because if you factor in 12 regular season games plus a conference championship game, then on top of that, if you win both playoff games, that's 15 games in a year. That's just way too much to put on a college student. I don't care what anybody. You're not going to change my mind. It's literally impossible to change my mind. You can try. I'll entertain your debates. I'm not going to tell you I hate you, but I'm just telling you that it's not going to happen. Regardless of that, I do like overall Joe Klatt's theory. I like his idea, but I do think it's high time that we expand the playoffs, minimize regular season games. You're going to add importance to that. There's a lot of different ways, as you can see by the way I formulated it, a whole lot of different things that you can go with in terms of rivalry games and, playing against teams that were kind of on your level from a season ago, because he did equate it to the NFL. And I love that idea. I love that aspect of doing it that way. And I think it's high time that we realize that these other kids deserve a chance too. Central Florida, I don't care if they would have got mauled. If you're undefeated, you deserve a chance to play. That's all there is to it. Western Michigan, I don't care if you would have got mauled. You were undefeated. You're letting in 1-loss football teams, 2-loss football teams. Come on. It's time. Didn't LSU win as a 2-loss football team during the BCS era? Didn't they play for a national title? They got picked over a 1-loss Georgia. Okay? So what I'm saying to you is, they won that game, but regardless, what I'm saying to you is it's high time that we really expanded our thinking. It really is. I am Drew Duncan, host of the Full Court Press. Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram is all at Drew Duncan 83. You can find me on YouTube. Simply look for Drew Duncan. The Full Court Press is on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram as well. Do not forget, we are wherever you listen to podcasts. Simply tell your device to play the Full Court Press by Drew Duncan. And as always, don't you dare touch that dial.